Okay, so in this video I'd like to demonstrate how to work with the guillotine. I've got, first of all, a stack of papers that we're going to cut through. So as you can see, it's a fairly large stack of paper. We could actually cut up to about 1.5 inches thickness on the guillotine here. But more importantly, let's just go through some of the features, some of the switches, and how this all works. There's a main power switch here, which turns the power onto the unit. But first, the locking key has to be turned on. In the on position, then you can turn on the power switch, and once you do that, you should see a line indicating where more or less the cut will be on the inside. It's more easily seen once you insert paper. You have a safety cover here that needs to be lifted up completely in order to disengage the safety and re-engage the safety when you're ready to cut. On the front here, you have a handle which adjusts the depth of the cut. And on the side over here through the little glass panel, you have a gauge which indicates the depth of the cut in both inches and centimeters. So in this case, I just want to take this pile of 11/17 paper and cut it in half to make two piles of 8.5 by 11. So what I'm doing here on the gauge is setting this exactly to 8.5 inches. And to prevent me from bumping that measurement, that adjustment, I'll pull out on the handle and let it hang freely here so that if I do knock into it, it's not going to readjust anything that I've set already. What we're going to do is slide the paper in all the way to the back and over to one of the edges, either the right or the left edge, trying to keep everything nice and square. In working with stacks like this, you can use the stacking block and just tap everything in both directions just to make sure everything's good and squared up. As you can see by the notes on the stacking block, do not leave that in the cutter because it will jam on the clamping head. So I've closed the lid now, and I'm able to execute my cut. There are 4 buttons on the front of the machine here, 2 which operate the clamping foot, and these have to be pushed simultaneously in order for them to work. So push and hold until the clamping bar stops. And now we're ready to cut. You can also see the line indicated across the paper gives us an indicator of more or less where the blade will come down. In order to operate the blade, then we move to the outer buttons with the blade icon, and again simultaneously have to be pushed in order for the blade to come down. If you need to adjust at this point and the clamping bar is down, you can push this button here right next to the power switch, and that will release the clamping bar so that you can reset, rejig things, and make sure that you've got it set and ready to go. So again, both buttons at the same time, push until the bar stops, you can let go, and then pushing on the outer buttons to execute the final cut. And there we go. Once it's stopped, then we can lift the lid and we can pull out our 2 piles of 8.5 by 11 paper that was cut from 11/17 stock. To the booklet that we saddle stitch, you can see we have our staples in here. The booklet is put together. Final trimming has to be done. We have crop marks here that indicate where we want to trim down to. The dial in this case is very handy because if we know what the final dimensions of this booklet should be, we can dial those in on our last 2 cuts to give us our final finished book. But in this case, the first cut, because we've got an overage of paper, we have to sort of dial in and eyeball the first cut. And what I'm going to do is just slide it back until my crop marks are very close to that light that's appearing across the document, across the booklet. Close my lid, clamp, and execute my cut. Okay. Now you'll notice that in some cases the last few pages of the document or the booklet come out somewhat rough, and that's simply because there's a polyethylene bar inside the machine that accepts the blade and protects the blade from being damaged. It's always a good idea to add a couple of sheets of paper underneath just to clean up that edge so that you get a proper cut all the way through. Now that we've cut our first edge, we'll rotate so that that edge is now up against our guides and the spine of our book is up against the back. This is where we can start to dial in our final dimensions. So if we know that the first cut is going to be 8.5 inches. From the spine out, we can dial up to 8.5 inches. Make sure everything's nice and square to the edges of the machine. Clamp and cut. Open the lid and we can remove the waste. Booklet turns another clockwise quarter turn and we insert it once again, and this time dialing the final dimensions of 11 inches, like so. Just make sure that the booklet is all the way back to the guides. Clamp and cut. And there we have our final 8.5 by 11 finished booklet. So make sure you check out the rest of our videos located at the Tech Info site at design.yorku.ca/tech_info.